Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm doing my wrap up for what I read in the Readathon 24 in 48. So if you're not too sure what I'm on about, the Readathon 24 in 48, like the name suggests, means that you try and read for 24 hours within a 48-hour time period. So it finished literally last weekend, which was the 26th and 27th, I think, something like that, and I did indeed manage to hit 24 hours worth of reading, which was pretty insane. I vlogged for most of it, so I'll link that down below if you're interested in watching that. And today what I wanted to do was wrap up the books that I read specifically in that, because otherwise January wrap up is going to be literally an hour long. So my reading stats were, few books that I technically started before the readathon began. I started and finished 7 books, which within that included 4 graphic novels and a play, and then I started 2 books that I've not yet finished. So I'm just going to very briefly cover. I started War and Peace and Rosewater, neither of which I have finished, so not going to be talked about in this wrap up. Within the readathon I did also read The Duchess of Malfi by Webster and Summer's Lease by Mortimer. Both of these, however, are on Mum's TBR, where she picked books off of her bookshelves to give to me. So I'm not going to be talking about them in this video today. I'm going to be waiting until I do a separate video for Mum's TBR. I will link that down below once it comes out, if it's not out already. So if you are interested in my thoughts on these, you need to go watch that video instead. So let's go for book number 1 on my stack, and that is Rise and Fall of the Dinosaur by Steve Brusatte. This is a non-fiction book that is part memoir and part just non-fiction about dinosaurs, as the name suggests. Steve is a paleontologist who specialises in dinos and all things dinosaur. He is world renowned in his field. He has worked with some of the greats in paleontology. He has discovered himself, I think it was something like 15 different new dinosaur species, and this is a wonderful book that takes a look from like pre-dinosaur era all the way through. You've got your Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic periods, and then also discussions about the I nearly said the apocalypse, but the extinction event that wiped them out, which I guess if you were a dinosaur was the apocalypse. It's a really wonderful blend of scientific information about dinosaurs, but also lots of personal anecdotes about the discovery of the different species and the various scientists who discovered them and how that happened. So it's interesting not just from a purely scientific point of view, but also from more of a kind of history of ideas, historical context, grounding it in real life people, and made me think about an entire separate side of science that I quite often forget about, which is that these were discovered by actual real people, and that these discoveries are an ongoing process, and with every new discovery we have to rethink the bank of information that we had before. Like, science often gets held up as a sort of universal truth idea, and actually it's a constantly evolving discipline like anything, and new information can completely change what we previously thought. For example, feathery dinosaurs. Yeah, you know, that's a thing. I'm obsessed with dinosaurs, so I absolutely love this book. It has some really good photos, but what I would say is if you are really keen, probably have your phone with you, because it's sometimes worth just like googling some of the names of the dinosaurs to get just even like rough sketch ideas of what they actually look like. Absolutely brilliant, 5 stars, adored it. Steve, you're the man. Another one that was a wonderful read, 5 stars, absolutely amazing, is Vox by Christina Dalcher. So this is a feminist literature. We're in a dystopian future where women are limited to only 100 words per day. So we had these like shock devices, think like a Fitbit, but it tracks your words rather than your steps, and when you hit 100 words, if you go over them, you get shocked, and the shocks will increase in power the more words you speak. Our main character is Jogn, who was a very respected scientist in her field before all of this was established, and she worked with Alzheimer patients and people who'd suffered strokes, which specifically targeting a certain part of your brain. It's when people's words get completely jumbled, so they know what they're trying to say but the words don't match up, so it just comes out as literal nonsense rather than the ones who have slurred speech. Very interesting from a scientific point of view. There was a lot of detail about that in the book, which I really enjoyed, because we all know on this channel I'm a bit of a nerd. I love it when you're chucking a bit of random extra information. I think it is very similar to The Power in a lot of ways, and the marketing for this book similar. We notice a similar colour theme to that bad boy. I thought it was very strong, and I really liked the characters, and generally I was quite happy with everything that it'd done. It made me very angry in places. Naturally, it's a book about silencing women. Of course I was livid. As we can see from this, I would be terrible at the 100 words a day. 100 words is nothing. Like, it's absolutely nothing. And also they limit sign language, so it's not even like you can try and, if they limit communication in general. Women aren't allowed to write. It's really intense. The only thing I found unbelievable, a little bit skeptical about this book, was it was set in America, and it implied that America was the only country that was doing it, but that all other countries were like, oh, those silly Americans doing that crazy thing, and that they hadn't interfered in any way. And I don't know how true that would ring to reality. I think it's a really powerful book. I think it's one definitely to check out. It's actually a surprisingly light and easy read given the subject matter, and I think if you disliked the sprawling nature of the power, you might like the more concentrated version of Vox. I hope all of that made sense. I don't think I've fully rounded out my ideas on this book beyond it being it was a really good reading experience. 4 graphic novels during the readathon, and let's go from least popular to most popular. Both of these were still very good, but there was one that was definitely better than the other. So I continued with Revival, with volume 3 and volume 4. I'm just going to talk about them as one entity. So Revival is a graphic novel set in Wisconsin where the dead have come back to life, and they're relatively normal. They're not like craving flesh or being zombies or any of that kind of canon there. But it's about the logistics of what that would be like if the dead genuinely did come back to life, and things like, you know, the town gets put into quarantine, there's issues down at the morgue, there's problems with all the fanatics that come out with it, and it's just really a look at the ramifications of that with a whole large cast of characters. It's a slow moving plot, and honestly plot is kind of being generous for this graphic novel series. What I'd say is it's more of an idea that it then sparks off in lots of different directions, and you're picking up lots of different threads as you go. So that's something which can be a little bit frustrating at times, because you don't really feel like you've actually moved on anywhere or anything is particularly happening. If you're going into this expecting like a really intense plot driven series, you're gonna be disappointed. But actually I think that it's got some really interesting discussions underneath it. Because it is that little bit slower, I did rate this one a little bit lower because I'm an action girl, so there were a few points where I did think that it was seriously dragging, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the other books do and how it will eventually tie this all together. So I'm definitely continuing with the series. And then one that I did really enjoy and was totally not expecting to was Chew Volume 1 and 2. This I picked up in America on a bit of a whim because they are so cheap. These were like $3 each in some kind of sale, and I'd heard a few things about Chew and it looked kind of funky and fun. Fun fact, the main character in this actually pops up as a cameo in Revival because they're both from Image Comics, which is kind of implying that they're all set in the same world, which is interesting. Very interesting. Has a lot of ramifications. But yeah, basically the way this works is our main character, Tony, is cyberpathic, which means that when he eats food, like literally anything, when he consumes something in general, he gets impressions about like its history and its lifetime. So an example it often gives in the opening is like if he eats an apple from a tree, he would know like how the tree grew and what pesticides the farmer had used and how the picking process had happened. And if he eats some bacon, he's gonna know what pig it came from and how the pig died and all that kind of thing. Now he ends up using this power for good as a member of the FDA, trying to crack down on various food-based crimes by using his abilities. It does branch off further into him consuming bits of people to try and find out things. If he like licks your blood, he can find out tons of stuff. There's a whole subplot to do with chicken and bird flu wiping out a ton of people. It's a little bit mental, I'm not gonna lie. Like I was going into it expecting almost basically like iZombie but with a dude, and no zombies but just like cannibalism, and that's a weird description of something, but actually it's got this whole other thing going on. It's really great fun. It's a little bit sexist. The female characters have tits that are like triple the size of their head, but other than that it's really great, and I really love the colours. Like it's all in these sort of sepia tones, and like the artwork is so stylized, and I really loved that. It felt like a film noir but with eating people. Which what do you want from a graphic novel? So definitely going to continue with that series. Thought it would. And then the final book for this wrap up was the most disappointing of all of them, which is unfortunate because my dad lent it to me, and that is Minna Needs Rehearsal Space by Dorte, which I think is from, yeah, she's Danish. This is in Denmark. So this is a very short story, 96 pages, and if I show you, it's all done in single lines, almost like kind of poetry. Sorry, the lighting's now freaked out. So can we see how it just sort of these singular things here. Because of that, like, there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of Minna does blah, Minna does A, Minna goes to B, Minna does C, and it kind of continues from there. And it's about a woman who gets done kind of struggling and basically goes off to find herself. But with a book like this, which is playing with the experimental form, I can't help thinking about the common phrase, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So just because you can write a book like this, where we only have a line, like a sentence per line, and it's all very broken up and it's kind of poetry but kind of not, doesn't mean you should actually write a story like that, because as it transpires, that's not a very good form in conveying your message. Dad loved this and raved about this, but he really likes that simplistic approach, whereas I'm a description girl and this was thin on the ground for things like that. So luckily it didn't take me very long, and it was an excellent palette cleanser for the 24 and 48 format, but it left me completely cold. So that is it for my wrap up. Those are all the books that I started and finished in the 24 and 48, minus the ones that are for Mum's TBR, which will be coming to you soon. It was a really interesting experience doing the 24 and 48. I have never tried to read for that length of time before, potentially outside of like a university context. I was chatting with my partner earlier and I was like, I probably read for a good 10-12 hours a day, several days a week during university, and didn't really blink at it, whereas that was genuinely hard work. Like, I think I got to about hour 16 and was like, oh my god, I still have so much to go, why am I doing this? And I did a decent chunk of it in audiobook. So I think for me, I probably won't do this readathon again, or if I do, I won't intend to try and hit 24 hours, because I think it's just too much for me, and I already have a really good habit for reading a fair amount, so I don't think I actively need to push myself to increase that, although it is pretty awesome to knock off this many books in one go. That's it from me. Have you done a readathon like this before? What do you think? Have you read any of these graphic novels? What do you think? What's your favourite dinosaur book? I want more dinosaur books. Give me your dinosaur book recommendations down below. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye guys.